Welcome to In the Know. I'm your host, Dan Reith, and we are excited to be bringing you the 2021 federal election candidate interview. Some housekeeping at the top of it. All candidates for the riding of Elgin-Middlesex-London, registered with Elections Canada, have been invited to participate in the interviews. All interviews will be plus or minus 30 minutes to allow for station breaks. And all candidates will be asked generally the same questions about themselves, their party leader, and their party platform. Our purpose is not to offer an opportunity for them to merely spout party talking points, but to help you get to know the candidates, to help you make a wise choice on September 20th. Our first guest is from the Liberal Party of Canada and a candidate for Elgin-Middlesex-London, Afeez Ajibowu. Afeez, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
I'm curious, I read your background, you have a really incredible life story. And so I want to start out by asking, from that, what is your unique ability? What is it special about you that you bring to the voters?
Right, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Dan. I think it draws on a few things, my strength, and particularly why I'm doing this. Draws basically from about three things. Obviously, one is my lived experience. I grew up, I originally come from Nigeria. I started my education in Nigeria, and sometimes mid-career, even from a privileged, standpoint for a Nigerian, I was doing well. I worked in some very, nice companies in some solid positions, global companies, incidentally. I'd worked in pharmaceuticals, I'd done brewing, I'd also done some manufacturing. The company that is now Kraft, Cadbury then. But just coming from all that, and also being able to leave Nigeria mid-career and deciding to go for a master's degree in England, so relocating totally. At the point when I'd already had two children, two lovely daughters at that point, took the whole family with me and went back. I went to England, and then, all that, including leading up to my coming to Canada, I think gives a unique global view. That's on the one hand, that enables one to see things from different perspectives. I think the other one is my educational background. I'm also very passionate about education. I have 4 degrees, 3 of them at postgraduate level. My first degree was in biochemistry. So I do have a solid grounding in the sciences. I also have a solid grounding in business. Like I said earlier, almost 25 years experience in managing businesses at different levels. I was in the boardroom of global companies, managing over $1 billion and supervising over 400 employees at one time. And these are global companies. I don't want to chronicle their names unduly because this is a political platform. So it doesn't sound like an endorsement in any way. But I think that worldview, and then coupled with some of the other things I've done locally, I do volunteer passionately in the London area. When I say London, extending to all the frontiers of London, about 40, 50 miles out. So I volunteer, things around diversity and inclusion, mental health, LGBTQ issues, the environment, and, including people at the base of the pyramid. People who are struggling to live day by day. So if there's an opportunity to maybe serve in a soup kitchen, for instance, I will do that. And I belong to a few organizations locally as well. And I've also served on some committees with the City of London Council. So I think that gives me solid grounding to step in and become an MP that can do 2 things. One, that can represent credibly the riding in Ottawa, that can sit in committee assignments, that can contribute to debates, that can trigger debates, that can trigger, laws, even private member bills. The usual saying is that it's difficult to get private member bills to become laws. But if you are triggering bills from the standpoint of knowledge and integrity that is driven by either your experience, your worldview, or your education, it becomes a lot easier to drive. So for me, that's my unique selling point in this game.
From your perspective, why are you better able to serve the constituents of Elgin-Middlesex-London than the current MP?
I'm not going to flip it around unduly. I could ask that question. 17 years of the riding in the hand of the other party, well, what has he done for the riding? So, but the question should be, why me? And I'm just going to point to a few things. So I touch 4 or 5 things that are very core to the people of the riding. One of them, I think, is housing, both affordability, rental affordability, that's geared to income. I think the other one is getting on the property ladder. So convention, or traditionally, you get out of, school, or you get into a trade, and then you work a few years, you put up some savings, either leveraging, schemes, that are widely available, and then you get onto the property ladder. And traditionally, your property then becomes your home, where you raise your family, where you have the peace of mind. And it's not by accident that most mortgages are like 25 or 30 years, because the expectation is that in 30 years, you would have finished paying your mortgages. And then traditionally, you also have that as your nest egg, as your savings for your old age. So when you eventually think of downsizing and all that, you do have some money to take you through old age. But, so that for me, something has gone wrong there, because, people come out of schools now, people get into trade, and they can't afford to even rent. For me, that is a serious issue that needs dealing with locally. The riding in hands of the conservative hasn't been able to deal with that. I think the issue of the opioid epidemic that we have in our downtown, you see people, whether from mental health issues or whether from just falling through the crack, just falling into poverty, homelessness and all that, combined with the other things that make people to get dependent on drugs. I think we should be able to deal with that. I'm going to focus on that and deal with that properly. Some of these are very difficult to talk about, because they are very difficult conversations, and people don't want to, approach what is difficult. I think the third one is true reconciliation with indigenous people. I want to establish those baseline positions for engaging true reconciliation with indigenous people, underpinned basically by the implementation of the TRC recommendation. Like I said, some of these things are uncomfortable to broach or to talk about. And I'm going to be asking those questions.
I really do wish we had a whole lot more time, not just for you, but for everyone. Just to one of your points you brought up about rental rates and affordable housing.
Yeah.
How will you make that happen? I mean, every city in Canada has an affordability issue with rents.
Yeah.
And the need to build affordable housing, other than government generating it fast and quick, you end up often, as we've seen in the south of the border, low cost housing becomes ghettoized. How do we prevent, how do we get what you're proposing with lower rents, but without getting ghettoization?
Absolutely. I think it's about being, providing credible solutions and matching those with the realities of the locale. So I did work in a bank briefly, one of the major banks, the big banks locally, and traditionally, you would need 3-4 times the median income of the locale to get on the median property threshold for that locale. So if people had traditionally between 40,000-50,000, generally as the median income for that locale, you would expect between 250,000-300,000 as the median income. I mean, median household property value for that locale, and that's what banks will use, to give you mortgages, because they want to be sure that you don't spend more than 30-40% of your gross income, on housing, so you have money for other things, including feeding, clothing, and going on vacation and all that. One of the things we can leverage strongly is the party's position. If you do check on the Liberal Party's website, you will see announced support for first-time home buyers, including the new first-time home buyer incentive. For me, I think that's a very credible platform. I also think beyond that, you need an engaged platform with local builders that ties in with the city. The city grants all the planning permissions, right? They decide and grant all the permissions. They enable new locations and all that to be decided. And in forward thinking, 4, 5, 6, 7 year planning, you want to be sure that the plans you bring in from the table, that's from the central party's platform, aligns with the thinking of the different mayors, align with the thinking of the New Home Builders Association. If you're doing them in vacuum, then you're not going to achieve any results. So my plan is to offer that credible platforms that enables the mayors, the city mayors, the different mayors of the different cities within the riding that I touch, that enables our MPPs from the province, and including the office of the premier, and obviously, the leverage of the federal might that comes with being an MP, to be able to sit I said, so what is the unique solution for St. Thomas? And design that unique solution. Now, if it's a rental issue, being able to sit with the major builders to say, okay, so in South London, I want to talk, I want to sit with Olduk, I want to sit with Drulo, and I want to sit with the mayor to say, okay, so what's the solution for South London that enables people get off the street? For me, I think it is shameful in 2021 to have one person sleeping on the street in a G7 country. For me, it's going to be a platform. It's going to be something I want to fix in the first 100 days. I won't have the total solution, but I'm going to be working with the mayors. I'm going to be working with the premiers. I'm going to be working with the new home builders, with the major rental companies to get people off the street. And I think that's the least we can do, as Canadians for each other.
Okay. Government or the pandemic has certainly been a part of our lives for the last 18 months. Government has identified that they are going to be moving towards all federal employees being fully vaccinated, but no comment with regards to MPs. Are you fully vaccinated yourself, sir?
I am absolutely fully vaccinated.
Yeah. And do you support all sitting MPs to be fully vaccinated?
Absolutely, I would. Yes.
Okay. We've got 2 minutes before our first break. I just want to ask you, from a personal perspective, if you and I were to meet 5 years from today, what would have to have happened in your life over the next 5 years for you to consider yourself happy and successful?
Like I said earlier at the beginning, I take myself as, even from coming from a privileged position, being able to look back and see how much impact I've made locally. For me, that's an index of happiness. So in 5 years, if I can see many more things that I've done locally, I did win the I Am London Award in 2018. And this was just only 3 years of my, settling down properly in the riding. 2018, I was recognized for contributing to the London area sufficiently enough to have been given that award. So in 5 years, I want to be able to look back and see my impact in mental health care, impact on the LGBTQ community, impact on youth-focused issues, including things that students and people just getting into trade, coming out of school, are passionate about. I want to be able to make significant impact. And obviously in politics, directly in the areas that will influence and impact people's life generally. Rural transit, we should be able to have conversations around. If I want to come between St. Thomas and London today, you either have a car or you do carpooling or you're doing Uber or any other thing. For me, as someone who lived in England, I know we're a much larger country, but every small town or city in England, for instance, is touched by a train. I'm not saying that's a solution for us, but we should be able to sit down. That's why we have experts for, to sit down and design what the local transit solution, public transit solution is for every part of the riding. So I want to be able to look back in 5 years and know that I was part of that solution.
Very good.
Thank you.
We unfortunately have to go to a short break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're visiting with Afeez Ajibowu, the Liberal candidate for the Elgin-Middlesex-London in the 2021 federal election. Welcome back to In the Know. I'm your host, Dan Reith, and we are interviewing today Afeez Ajibowu, the Liberal candidate for Elgin-Middlesex-London in the upcoming federal election. Afeez, I want to ask you now about your assessment of your leader. And again, I will be asking a very similar question of all the candidates as we go through their interviews. But I want to ask you, Mr. Trudeau has been criticized as being an admitted groper, performed in blackface. He's been convicted of 2 ethics violations around the SNC-Lavalin affair, and in 2016, a Christmas vacation with the Aga Khan. Then there was the WE scandal. He's been identified in numerous press articles having broken many past election promises. Top 5 I could find was around mobile phone and internet costs, failure to deliver pharmacare, failure to reform democracy and how Canada votes, failure to support the military, ongoing budget deficits, and failing with the reconciliation in Indigenous communities across the country. Why is Mr. Trudeau still fit to lead?
Okay, thank you for that question. So typically one would, struggle a bit to make judgments, about other human beings, right? But we do have a passionate leader, in our party, and the Honorable Prime Minister, is someone that I've watched, studied. For me, at 52, I won't take any decision lightly. So joining this party, for me, affirms my belief in certain values. And I see in the leadership of the party, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, someone who believes that everyone should have a fair chance to succeed. I think it draws strongly on his experience as a teacher, as a father, as a leader, and as an advocate for youth, in serving and, and dedicating and shaping how people turn out in the country. And you could see that, I mean, we've come through a very difficult couple of years, pandemic. I think we've come out much more strongly than one would have, thought. Perhaps at the beginning of the pandemic, it was very chaotic, early 2000. And I think we've done fairly very well, if you check. So maybe a few goals, will have been missed. Maybe, the conversations around totally opening up, a telco, internet market in driving towards, very fair pricing for all. Maybe a few other milestones will have been missed, either in, implementing all the full recommendations of the TRC, with indigenous peoples and all that. But I think the opportunity Canadians have with this election is truly electing a parliament that is strongly in the hands of one party, so that it's a lot easier to take decisions. I know, negotiation and all that are the hallmarks of, a mature democracy. So you will say, alliance with another parties, maybe the NDP and all that, ensures that you don't get a dictatorship and all that. But this is Canada. This is one of the more mature democracies in the world. So if Canadians strongly believe in the platforms of the party, whether it's on home buyers incentives and making, properties much more affordable for first-time buyers, whether it's in accelerating, adjoining towards net zero emissions by 2050, and so many of the other platforms that you'll find on the Liberal website, I think it just makes sense in this election to vote the Liberal Party in all ridings. And I'm going to be drawing it particularly to the Elgin-Middlesex riding. It just makes sense to vote Liberal. After 17 years, of the Conservatives, the question should be, what have they done for us in Elgin-Middlesex-London? And that's why I'm strongly, hoping and I'm trusting that voters will come out and vote the Liberal in Elgin-Middlesex-London. Right? I mean, we're changing society. A lot has happened in all the 8 years or so that I've been in this riding. And we do have this unique opportunity. We don't want to wait another 4 years. Thank you.
Having looked at both platforms, actually having read all the platforms in preparation for this, I want to ask you, from your perspective, what's the difference between the Liberal Party and the NDP? Because their platforms, you can almost lay them one over top of the other. So if for those, if I were, or for those who are really uncertain voters, what's the difference between the two parties?
Okay, so and I don't want to use the long tape rule measure of where someone sits, the either ends of the spectrum, whether the far left or the far right and all that, all those buzzwords that you see online, that I think what you will see in the Labour Party, and I'm not going to make a huge judgment on the NDP, because this is a Labour Party, I'm a candidate of this party, in the riding, is that we do have very clear mandates and goals and plans that you will see on our website, particularly on achieving the net zero emission by 2050, taking real fight against climate change, including putting clear pricing on pollution, support for home buyers, first-time home buyers, including that home buyers incentive that I mentioned earlier, core investments, in transit, and which in my riding, I can flow into rural transit. And of course, the response that we've had to the pandemic, including procuring, vaccines immediately, swiftly for the provinces to take, and obviously enabling the provinces to take charge of how they manage all that distribution, and including supporting them to do all that effectively. So you can split that into the other arguments around tax breaks, whether for the wealthy or for those at the base of the pyramid. But if you check our platform online, this party has a plan to lower income taxes for the middle class and continue to raise them incrementally for the wealthiest, so that people pay, their fair share of taxes. We do need money to implement some of these, very ambitious plans that you see on our platform. But the plan is not to burden or to continue to burden in any way those that are already, stretched, either because, we've had inflation that you have typically 4% yearly, depending on, what happens to the macroeconomy. But also because you think people right at the top of the pyramid should pay a lot more, of their fair share, of income taxes. So I think the opportunity for voters is to look at the platforms of the parties clearly and see that this is truly differentiated, and that the Liberal Party, voting the Liberal Party in this election gives us the opportunity, to have a majority government that can vote on legislations and implement them, so that we're not spending another couple of years or 3 years debating in the parliament and, on policies that, you have no fair chance of bringing the other party on board, because that just wastes everyone's time. We do have the opportunity at this election to vote the Liberal Party and get things going for Canadians.
When I read through the platform for the Liberal Party, I'm curious from your perspective, what would be the 2 or 3 most important items for residents of Elgin-Middlesex-London? If you could only champion three planks of this platform, what would be the 3 most important things that you would want to bring to fruition?
I think what's been missing in the riding is bringing that federal might and investments in infrastructure. So whether it's in transit, roads, bridges, and all that. And that's the only way you can open up the communities, particularly for, a riding that has so many rural towns and all that. So I'm going to be championing within that framework, a pocket for rural transit that is customized, that is unique, to the region. And like I said, the solution is now in my head. I'm going to be enabling all the experts to sit down and build that within the federal provision of funding, and then the leverage that comes with being a federal MP to attract that funding, to the riding. Like I said earlier, I think the other one is the climate change and how that affects, the riding and farmers particularly. This riding has a lot of rural, communities, and has a lot of farmers that are truly concerned about the effect of climate change on, you see that on cycles of crop. I grew up in a farming household as well, and I know what that means when seasonal changes or variations start affecting, your planting season or your harvest season or output in a particular, as I say. And the farmers are already battling with so many other things, that they want someone who has very clear plans in combating those things that are suddenly introducing variances in how they run their farms and their operations and their businesses. I have 2 other things, that are not totally within the total umbrella of the party, but I think I'm going to be passionate about, for farmers in this riding. One of them, I'm going to be asking for us to look at the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, and look at something. We gave some grounds. I know we had to do that, right, under the previous government in America, but I think we lost about $200 million in, net bottom line. We're having milk, we gave some concessions, obviously. So I want to look at those provisions again and see if there are opportunities for us to relook. This is not on the federal radar, but I'm going to be bringing it up, because if I'm voted from here to represent the farmers, I might as well go to Ottawa with what the farmers want discussed. So I'm going to be fighting to get some of those concessions, clawed back. I think the other thing is the right to repair bill that was introduced by the honorable gentleman from Cambridge at the last parliament. I'm going to be looking and strongly supporting that bill. It's gone through the second reading from what I checked the last time. The right to repair bills. If you've spent $1 million on buying farm implements, and you do have the capacity or capabilities to check and repair and fix, irrespective of the agreement that you've signed, either with the funding company or the bank or the provider of the equipment, you should have the opportunity to fix your farm implements within the law. Currently, you can do that. And I think, it's time to start looking at some of those things and have someone who can fight, to change those laws. 17 years of the conservative in this riding hasn't made that happen. And that's going to be on top of my list.
I'm going to cut you there, and good time to end, because now we're down to our last minute and a half. So I want to give you that minute and a half to tell us why Afeez is the right candidate to vote for Elgin-Middlesex-London on September 20th.
Okay, thank you so much again, Dan, for having me on the program. So I'm going to be saying that you have someone who is passionate about this country. I know I came from overseas less than 10 years ago, but I've lived every day, every second as a Canadian since I became a Canadian, got my citizenship. I've lived every day trusting that I can continue to contribute to this country in living it better than I met it. I'm going to be spending and using everything that I am, including, like I said earlier, my education. I've got 4 degrees. My experience, I've got over 25 years working in global companies. And I currently work with one of the school boards locally. I'm going to be leveraging all those strongly in working on your behalf in Ottawa. I'm going to be working for you in Ottawa, not working for the party in Elgin-Middlesex-London. And you do have the opportunity. I'm going to have an open door where you can come in, ask me questions, charge me, what you want achieved. And, I'm just asking, vote for me. You have this opportunity in 17 years to change what hasn't worked for you and elect someone who will work on your behalf in Ottawa. I believe in this community. I'm invested in this community. My children are growing up in this community, and I want to work for this community in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Afeez. It was a pleasure having you on the show. We, on behalf of myself and Rogers, we wish you all the most success in your campaign. I know as a first-time candidate, it's overwhelming, but give it your best.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure you'll do well. For those of you watching, if you want to learn more about Afeez, you can visit him at his website at afeezajibowu.ca.
.com.
Oh, sorry, .com. If you want to learn more about the Liberal Party and their platform, visit liberal.ca/ourplan. Remember, Election Day is September 20th. To find out more about your polling station or mail-in ballots, go to Elections Canada, and you can find out all the information there. Thank you all for watching. Now you are in the know. Take care.